WJTV 12 presents Veterans Voices, honoring those who serve.
Good evening. I'm Walt Grayson. And for the next 30 minutes, we'll be sharing stories of America's servicemen and women, and also tales of battle from the Civil War up to our most recent conflicts. Now, according to the State Veterans Affairs Board, Mississippi is home to more than 193,000 veterans, about 6% of the state population. That's a little above the national average. And more than 40% of Mississippi's veterans are over age 65. Interestingly, 27,000 of the state's veterans own their own business. Mississippi's home to around 3,000 World War II vets. More than 24 came together recently as a stretch of highway was unveiled in their honor. WJTV's Shay O'Connor joins us with the story.
Simpson County, a portion of Highway 49 was renamed Mississippi World War II Veterans Memorial Highway in reverence to the many soldiers from the Delo community who fought in the war. Now, I attended the ceremony in September and spoke with a 95-year-old veteran. He was thrilled to be honored in a town that had the biggest amount of veterans to serve in the entire United States. George Mitchell fought in World War II from 1943 to 1945. He was drafted at age 19 and says the war changed his life in many ways.
Well, it was something I wasn't expecting to get into, but I appreciated the fact that I was able to go and serve my country and do my part to make this country free.
Mitchell is from Simpson County, just outside of Delo. About a third of the town left to serve in the war. Mitchell says the renaming of Highway 49 is a huge milestone and one that many of the living vets in Delo can be proud of.
The town of Delo, that area, had more people to serve in the World War II than any other part of the United States. 16 million of us in World War II, and now there's less than 1 million. Anybody that was served in World War II would be 90 years old or more today. And I'm just glad that I was able to serve, and I'm glad to be here today.
Today is the fulfillment of a dream that we had over a year ago to say thank you to all of our World War II veterans in Mississippi.
Agriculture Commissioner Andy Gibson says while in office, House Bill 1208 was put into place to rename Highway 49 to Mississippi World War II Veterans Memorial Highway. He says honoring those who served from the small town for their courageous deeds to our country is long overdue.
The people we're honoring today, and all of our veterans, but especially this World War II generation, they never were a group to toot their own horn. They went and they did what they saw as their duty, and they came back and went back to work and enjoyed the freedoms that they fought to preserve. So it's time some of us stand up and say thank you. We appreciate you.
And George Mitchell served in England during his time in World War II. He also had a brother who served in the South Pacific. Now, he says his brother was drafted 2 years earlier than he was drafted. When the war ended, they came home a day apart. Mitchell says he attributes their safe arrivals home to prayers from all the small towns within the state of Mississippi. Reporting in studio, Shay O'Connor, WJTV 12.
Now, not all of the activity in World War II happened over there. An important part of the special training happened over here. And by that, I mean right here up on North State Street at the Millsaps College campus. Millsaps College played an important role in World War II by educating young officers as a part of the V-12 Navy College Training Program. At 11:30 a.m. on Wednesday, October 19th, the college honored the V-12 classes with a ceremonial flag raising, as they intend to do every year.
A lot of people came through here and went on to flight schools, but there was some other specialized training here, and these candidates who came through here went on to really be leaders in the U.S. victory in World War II. To know that Millsaps was one of only 131 colleges around the country selected to be part of this, that we drew people from 40 states that came through here, and that just over 3 years that this program was in place. It's a legacy that we're very proud of, and we want to continue to honor. They were the greatest generation, still are, and we want to honor and remember their service.
This year marks 65 years since the fighting ended in the Korean conflict, although the war itself has never officially ended. Among the thousands of Mississippians who served in Korea is a local vet who just happens to be the grandfather of one of our photojournalists here at WJTV, Drew Hall. Drew recently drove down Highway 18 to Raleigh to pay him a visit. And as Drew reports, although time may march on, for some vets, memories of combat stays vivid.
That's it, brother. Third one, fourth one from the top. Can you read it?
J.B. Hall is a Korean vet, retired Jackson police officer, and most importantly, my papa. He, like many of these vets, joined the Army to see life outside of Smith County.
We did odd jobs and trying to make $10 to go to town with on Saturday night, and sometimes you didn't have $5 to even buy a jar of homebrew with or nothing. And we just got tired of it. There we go.
Feeling like his involvement in the war was inevitable, he decided to volunteer.
They're gonna get us, there ain't no doubt about that, because they're drafting a bunch of guys. And I says, if we volunteer, this is me thinking now, we might have a better chance maybe of going to Europe.
After basic training, it didn't take long for a fresh-faced Private Hall to find himself not in Europe, but on his way to war in Korea.
Riding along there, and there's a big sign right on the side of the road. You are now crossing the 38th parallel. I said, damn, I've done gotten Korea here all of a sudden.
He was stationed with the 25th Division along a combat defense line. It only took a few weeks before he experienced the brutality of war.
They went down on their hands and knees. And all of a sudden, they come alive on the backside. And the old commander back where we started, get the hell off of that place. Get away from up there. Come on down here. And before he got through, we were halfway down that hill.
Luckily, the North Koreans' concussion grenades only stunned the squad. That was only one of many close calls as his company was sent to a now legendary battlefield.
Moved from there up to the Heartbreak Ridge. Easing along there, and I heard this round come in, and I hit the ground. That thing, when I went to hit the ground, about far from here's the door from me, kaboom! Never did go off. That's a good feeling.
A feeling that has remained with an old soldier for a lifetime. The war soon ended, and my grandpa went back to work, married my grandmother, raised my dad and aunt, and became one of many veterans that we love and honor on this Veterans Day. For WJTV 12, I'm Sergeant J.B. Hall's grandson, Drew Hall.
Yeah, Drew tells us that Sergeant Hall did eventually make it to Europe like he was hoping to begin with, but it didn't happen until after the war. He served the remainder of his time in the military in Germany. Well, when we come back, war stories few have heard will be told. African Americans on the Civil War battlefield, and the reenactors making sure that this piece of history is not forgotten.
WJTV 12 presents Veterans Voices, honoring those who serve.
What if they gave a war and nobody came? Well, it's a line adopted from a Carl Sandburg poem, and it was thrown about quite a bit during the Vietnam War era. But what if in a major war, the people did come in great numbers, but few people know about them or give them credit? Well, that's the situation reenactors of the 3rd U.S. Colored Cavalry and descendants of the veterans of that Civil War group are trying to correct. And they're doing it with living history events like the one held near Natchez recently. Well, the first time I ever heard of African-American soldiers in the Civil War came when I saw this headstone in the Grand Gulf Cemetery in Claiborne County. Couldn't figure out what the USC stood for. It's United States Colored Infantry. Never heard of them. Well, that lack of acknowledgement and lack of knowledge is what the members of the 3rd U.S. Colored Cavalry reenactors are trying to combat. Now, they were recently at the annual Black and Blue Living History event at Jefferson College in Washington near Natchez. Black and Blue acknowledges the black soldiers who wore the blue uniform of the Union in the Civil War. John Russell is spokesperson for the group. But why is the contribution of these troops not more prominent in the history books?
Well, you said it's the U.S. Colored Cavalry. In reality, if they did the history, this unit should be more famous than any cavalry unit from the Civil War because they were the fightingest Union cavalry unit of the war.
Well, thank goodness for Google. You can look them up. The 3rd U.S. Colored Cavalry was organized here in Mississippi and saw action from Milligan's Bend in the Vicksburg Campaign all the way through Grierson's second raid through Mississippi in 1865, when a good half of his troops were African American, and much more.
It was never presented history.
The African American presence in the Civil War has really just started to come to light. Now, for instance, the African American monument in the Vicksburg Park was just erected in 2004. And on this day, descendants of the members of the 3rd U.S. Colored Cavalry are at this event celebrating their veteran ancestors.
Our grandfather was Brad Ford. He's buried at the National Cemetery here as a Civil War soldier.
Well, the war has been over for more than a century and a half, but the campaign continues for recognition for the African Americans who fought in it. And the 3rd U.S. Colored Cavalry reenactors have a couple of goals. One is short-term.
Trying to stay on our horses.
But the long-term goal shed some light on a page of our history that's been overlooked and bring recognition to the U.S. colored troops of the Civil War, another group of honored veterans who fought and died for America. And now when we come back, she performed as a drummer in the military. Now she's making them laugh in comedy clubs. We talk with local veteran Rita Brent next.
WJTV 12 presents Veterans Voices, honoring those who served.
She is an up-and-coming comedian. Jackson's own Rita Brent has opened for some of the biggest names in stand-up. And performing has been a part of her life since an early age, even during her time in the military. Rita spent 9 years in the Army as a drummer with the 41st National Guard Band, and she recently talked about how that experience has shaped her path to a very different career.
I was in the 41st Army National Guard Band. It was under the umbrella of the Adjutant General, and we were responsible for playing music all over the state. I was always a drummer from a young age, 8 years old, and it was very refreshing to learn that I could be a musician in the military because I had no idea. I got in when I was 18, so right after I graduated from high school, I was 18, and I decided to go into the military. I came in as an E4 because back then you could be an E4 as a musician because you had to audition to get in the military. By the end of my service, I ended up being a sergeant, so I ended as a sergeant/E5. They have several bands. There was a jazz band, a rock band, a concert band, a marching/ceremonial band, and I was in all those bands as a drummer. I was considered 42 Romeo. That's the MOS for my job when I was in the Army. Some of the Army values, things like duty and courage and selfless service, all those things I've been able to transfer into my entertainment world. Serving the military taught me to be grateful to be free. It taught me to be grateful to be free and to appreciate family, because if you are a member of the military, it's very possible that you could lose someone. So it just taught me to appreciate those around me and not take any time for granted.
While Rita works toward becoming the next big thing, she's encouraging others to follow her path. And she tells us that wherever she goes, she talks up the lessons learned from her years in the Army Band. And coming up next, a local veteran who ended up on the front lines of Iraq and Afghanistan, and how those early lessons in life and death impacted who he is today.
WJTV 12 presents Veterans Voices, honoring those who served.
Right here in Mississippi, there are many government officials who have a long line of service experience. Now, for one federal worker, he has the military to thank. Edward Houston is a father, a husband, a deacon at his church, but he's also a leader in the community, working for the Department of Labor. After 2 decades of military experience in the Army and National Guard.
I had 2 tours. One tour was in Afghanistan in 03. In 06, I was in Iraq. I travel all over the place. I've been to Honduras. I've been to Ecuador.
Some may long for opportunities to see and travel the world. Houston says his time overseas was an education. His combat experience taught him to appreciate things that are often taken for granted in the United States. It gave him an entire new outlook on life.
And while you're over there, they don't know when the next bomb going to come across, or they don't know where the next food is going to, where the next food going to come. But you have a mission, and you try to accomplish that mission, and and once you get back, you appreciate the U.S.
Houston isn't alone. Many of those he served with feel the same way. They still cherish their time spent together and lessons learned.
We still have a bond with the sergeant majors, with some of our colonels, where we meet up sometime in Tupelo, and I tell you, we think about times that we was over there, and we just think of the good and the bad times.
And those good times and bad times are what Houston says shaped him into the man he is today.
You make your life what you want to make your life. You want to make your life hard, it'll be hard. If you want to make it soft, it'll be soft. So we have the opportunity in the United States. You know, being the only son, you know, and with 3 other sisters, you got to understand that, you know, my guideline was through my father, my grandfather, but I tell you, the military really showed me how to be a person who I am today.
Yeah, Houston served a total of 24 years. He retired a Sergeant First Class with the rank of E7. Now, when we come back, a World War II veteran who's seen a lot of history and just celebrated a milestone.
WJTV 12 presents Veterans Voices, honoring those who serve.
Now, not many people can say they remember when television was invented, or when Pearl Harbor was attacked, or before man walked on the moon. But Leroy Wilson can. He turned 100 about 2 weeks ago, and his family and his friends gathered shortly after to honor the patriarch, not only as being a veteran of World War II, but also as being a solid member of the Mississippi community. Shay O'Connor reports.
Roy Wilson Jones was overwhelmed by the turnout for his 100th birthday celebration Sunday. Those closest to Jones say he was born in the Delta and was a farmer. Then came World War II.
He was raised as a sharecropper in the Delta. They drafted him for World War II, but he went to the draft board when they called him up and says, I cannot go. And they said, why can you not go? He said, because I still have crops in the field. So to make a long story short, they allowed him to get his crops out of the field before he went to war.
During World War II, Jones served in the Army stationed in Hawaii and in the South Pacific. The AAA Battalion also did a stint in intelligence. After serving in the war, Jones returned to Mississippi to his love for farming and family.
He's a very solid individual. Everything is straightforward. He sees things through a different lens than most people, and the lens is kindness, but with focus and discipline. But he's a great man.
Leroy Jones is my granddad, and he is 100 years old, and we wish him 100 more years. He is the heart of our family.
You look good, Uncle Roy. We wish you many more years. Love you.
One thing I would wish for him would be peace, love, and happiness. Because that's all he really needs, and that's all he wants.
Leroy Wilson Jones will be recognized again at the city of Pearl on Veterans Day in their Veterans Day celebration, which is actually coming up on November 9th. Well, that's all the time we have. I hope you've enjoyed WJTV's presentation of Veterans Voices, and we hope you found it meaningful. I'm Walt Grayson. Thanks for watching. And to all veterans in the metro area and around the country, thank you for serving our country.